Imagine a city of silver towers, shining in the moonlight, a beacon of Gondor's strength and hope. Yet, within the span of centuries, this very city would be swallowed by darkness, its walls gleaming with an eerie glow, cursed and feared by all who beheld it. This is the story of how Minas Ithil, the Tower of the Moon, became Minas Morgul, the Tower of Sorcery. Minas Ithil was born from the ashes of Númenor's downfall, when that proud island kingdom sank beneath the waves in the year 3319 of the Second Age. Elendil and his sons, Isildur and Anarion, fled to Middle-earth. There, they founded two great realms, Arnor in the north and Gondor in the south. Anarion built Minas Anor, later known as Minas Tirith, while his brother Isildur raised Minas Ithil in Ithilien, close to the borders of Mordor. These cities were not mere fortresses, they were symbols of Númenor reborn. To protect their realms, the exiles brought with them the Palantiri, the seeing stones of the west. One was set within Minas Ithil and another in Minas Anor. In Minas Ithil, Isildur planted a seedling of the White Tree, descended from Nimloth of Númenor, which he had saved before his homeland's destruction. For over a century, the city flourished, a gleaming watchtower guarding the eastern frontier of Gondor. But peace in Middle-earth was never destined to last, for the shadow of Sauron, the same dark power that had brought Númenor to ruin, rose again in Mordor. When Sauron returned, he struck Minas Ithil with overwhelming force. The city was sacked, its White Tree burned in malice. Yet Isildur escaped, carrying with him his family, the last seedling of the tree, and a burning vow for vengeance. This tragedy sparked the last alliance of elves and men, the great war that would bring Elendil, Isildur, and Gil-galad to the very gates of Mordor. After the 7-year siege of Barad-dûr, Sauron was finally overthrown. Isildur cut the One Ring from the Dark Lord's hand, and for a time, evil seemed banished from the world. With Mordor broken and its master gone, Minas Ithil was reclaimed and rebuilt. Once again, it stood as Gondor's shining watchtower against the shadows of the east. For nearly 2,000 years, Minas Ithil remained strong. Its towers gleamed under the moonlight, guarding the passes that led into Gondor. The Palantir within its walls was still used by Gondorian rulers to watch the dark lands beyond. In those days, Minas Ithil was more than a fortress. It was a reminder of the vigilance of the Dunedain, and of the cost of their hard-won victory. But darkness never sleeps for long in Middle-earth. Far to the north, a new evil stirred. The Witch King of Angmar, chief of the Ringwraiths. For centuries he waged war upon Arnor, the northern kingdom of Isildur's line. By cunning and relentless force, he shattered that realm, leaving its cities in ruins and its people scattered. Yet, though Arnor fell, the Witch King himself was eventually defeated. A host of Gondorians and elves marched against him, and his power in the north was broken. Still, he was not destroyed. Around the year 1980 of the Third Age, the Witch King fled south, returning to Mordor. There he gathered the other 8 Nazgûl, preparing for the return of their master. And it was Minas Ithil, the proud city of Isildur, that would become their first great prize. In the year 2000, the Ringwraiths emerged from Mordor beneath the cover of night. An army of men who had once served Sauron, now leaderless and corrupted, marched with them. They laid siege to Minas Ithil, and for 2 long years Gondor resisted. But the terror of the Nine was unlike any force the city had ever faced before. At last, Minas Ithil fell.
The palantir of the city, known as the Ithil Stone, was seized and later taken to Barad-dûr, and from that moment the city was no longer Minas Ithil, the Tower of the Moon. It was corrupted into Minas Morgul, the Tower of Sorcery. Minas Ithil was no more. What had once been a radiant tower beneath the moonlight was now cloaked in a ghastly glow. Walls pale with a sickly green fire, and gates shaped like leering faces. Fell spirits and twisted creatures took residence within. From its balconies and battlements, the Witch King and his host poured their malice into the land. Ithilien, once a fertile province of Gondor, became a haunted wilderness. Its people abandoned their homes, fleeing westward, for none dared dwell in the shadow of Minas Morgul. From that day onward, Minas Morgul waged an endless war against Gondor. Across the great river Anduin stood its eternal rival, Minas Anor. No longer merely the Tower of the Sun, Minas Anor was renamed Minas Tirith, the Tower of Guard, to stand in defiance of the sorcery across the valley. It became the front line in Gondor's long struggle for survival. But Morgul's power was not just in armies. The Witch King sought to break Gondor's spirit, to snuff out its line of kings. In 2043 of the Third Age, he issued a challenge of single combat to Gondor's king, Iarnur. Years earlier, Iarnur had led Gondor's forces against Angmar and struck a blow that contributed to the Witch King's downfall in the north. The Ringwraith had not forgotten. Though proud and eager for battle, Iarnur was restrained by his steward, who reminded him that the Witch King's power lay not in swords, but in sorcery and terror. The king wisely refused the duel. But the Witch King was patient. 7 years later, in 2050, he issued the challenge again. This time, Iarnur's pride got the better of him. Against the council of his lords, he rode out with a small company to the gates of Minas Morgul. They were never seen again. With Iarnur's death, the line of Gondor's kings ended. Rule passed to the stewards who would guard the realm in the name of a king who never returned, until at last an heir of Isildur would rise in the War of the Ring.
With the kings of Gondor gone, Minas Morgul grew bolder. Its armies struck again and again across the river, testing the strength of the stewards. In the year 2475 of the Third Age, a new terror emerged from its gates: the Uruk-hai. Stronger, larger, and more disciplined than common orcs, they were bred for war. Many believe these foul creatures were first spawned in the pits of Minas Morgul itself. The Uruk-hai swept through Ithilien, leaving nothing but ruin in their wake. Osgiliath, once the proud capital of Gondor, was besieged and devastated. The white bridge that spanned the Anduin was broken, and the city fell into ruin. Though Gondor fought back valiantly under Steward Boromir, an ancestor of the Boromir we know from the Fellowship, the scars of Morgul's onslaught could never be fully healed. Boromir the Steward himself was gravely wounded by a Morgul blade. Though he did not become a wraith, the wound left him weakened, plagued by pain until his death. Such was the cruelty of Minas Morgul's sorcery. It could kill not only the body, but erode the will, leaving despair behind long after the battle was done. And yet, the shadow was only growing darker. By the end of the Third Age, the Lord of the Rings had returned. From Minas Morgul poured forth not only armies, but dread itself, a constant reminder that Gondor was besieged on its very doorstep. The Nazgûl used the city as their lair, and the pale light that radiated from its walls was so terrifying that even to look upon it struck fear into the hearts of men. In June of 3018, Sauron's forces once again moved out of Minas Morgul. They attacked Osgiliath, testing Gondor's defenses and paving the way for the Ringwraiths to slip northward in search of the One Ring. This was only the beginning of the storm that Minas Morgul would unleash upon Gondor in the War of the Ring. By the spring of 3019, Minas Morgul was no longer content to remain a shadow on Gondor's border. The Witch King himself, Sauron's greatest servant, led a vast host from its gates. The ground trembled as countless orcs, trolls, and easterlings poured out of the Morgul Vale, their pale banners gleaming with sickly light. After a brief clash at Osgiliath, the Witch King advanced upon Minas Tirith, beginning the Battle of the Pelennor Fields. From the balcony of the White City, Pippin the Hobbit would later recall the terrible sight. Out from the gates of Minas Morgul there issued a great host, and the valley was lit with a pale, deadly fire.
It was the last and greatest march of that cursed fortress. But fate had turned against the powers of darkness. On the Pelennor, the Witch King was brought down, fulfilling the prophecy that no man could slay him. His armies were shattered, and with Sauron's defeat soon after, the might of Minas Morgul was broken forever.
When Aragorn, now King Elessar, led the army of the West into the Morgul Vale, they found no resistance. The terror of the city had fled with its master. Aragorn ordered the bridge across the Morgul Dwyn destroyed, and the surrounding lands put to flame, so that no shadow could linger. Minas Morgul was left an empty husk, a ruin steeped in corruption. Elessar decreed that the city should never again be inhabited by men, for its stones had been too deeply poisoned by sorcery. Instead, he named Faramir the Prince of Ithilien, and together with his beloved Éowyn, they made their home in Emin Arnon, restoring life and beauty to the green land once overshadowed by Morgul's curse. And so, Minas Morgul, the Tower of Sorcery, passed out of history. Whether the Tower of the Moon will ever rise again, cleansed of its shadow, is a mystery left untold. All that remains are ruins, and the memory of a city that once shone bright, before it was swallowed by darkness. And so ends the tale of Minas Ithil's fall into shadow, and its rebirth as Minas Morgul. From a beacon of Gondor's strength to a fortress of dread, its story reminds us how light can be twisted, and how even the greatest towers may fall. If you enjoyed this journey into Middle-earth's history, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more deep lore and hidden stories of Tolkien's world. Until next time, may the stars of Elbereth guide your path and keep the shadows at bay.